Welcome, Immortalites, to another round of the conversations. Yesterday, I had on Emmet Louis, who has also garnered the nickname of the Splits Wizard. So Emmet is a coach who helps people gain their splits, amongst other things, with programs and projects such as the modern methods of mobility and handstands through the Handstand Factory and their courses. He's also a podcaster who hosts the Handstand Cast and Bendability, and he's also got other fires burning amongst his own personal practices of being a former acrobat, one-arm handstands, juggling, all that sort of thing, and going for a PhD. He's a busy guy. So in this conversation, we started off with body movement. Why do people actually move? The difference between flexibility and mobility, as well as injury prevention and management, helping me deal with my own bloody tendonitis that's been flaring up. We then also get into his coaching style, where he actually gets his resources from. What is the point of a coach? What is the difference between someone like me who's a bit more self-taught and gains resources from elsewhere, and what he does and specializes in? Before getting into, I suppose, the more esoteric, ephemeral, you might even say, his own Taoism practices, thoughts on religion. We get into science and how you can differentiate between what is true between science and hearsay, and the whole fitness industry, which is very difficult to pass out. And also a pretty fun theory related to fashion and how this actually influences body type. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please join in. I put chapter markers everywhere, so just jump to the section you would like to if you want to do it that way. Other than that, listen to the whole thing, and I really hope you do enjoy this conversation with Emmet. You told this story of your uncle and your father who were bird watching, and then they decided like they needed to take it next level and go into bird eating. Which I can only imagine was either due to boredom and they'd seen all the birds, or they somehow thought they could gain the power of flight. So my question to you is, does this run in the family? And if so, have you thought about what sort of students you would like to eat to gain their stat points?
Sort of student? I haven't thought about eating students. Yeah. But Dad and the uncle was, I think it was like probably in the 60s in Ireland. So people kind of think Ireland, you know, it's a weird kind of juxtaposition. So Ireland, if you ask Americans, we're still living in mud huts and horse and carts.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're an advanced technological civilization now. But in the 60s was kind of the midpoint of that. So where they lived was near it's a place called Bull Island in Ireland, where it's a kind of, when they built the port, they put a wall up and this estuary formed with a marsh. And then they went through like bird watching, but then they had air rifles. So then they decided to like eat everything in their bird watching book to check it out. So yeah, I never thought about eating students.
See, I'm not a teacher of any sort, but I was thinking like, you know, maybe like a contortionist, because that's kind of one of the ones where you can't really level up unless
it's kind of like
you're willing to break some bones, maybe.
What was that series? Was it Heroes? Do you remember that one? It was back maybe 10, 15 years ago.
I'm aware of it. Yeah. I don't think I ever watched it.
They had that guy, Seiler, who was just like, he was a clockmaker. His ability was to understand how things work. But then he realized if he just like cracked open people's skulls, he could see how the superpowers worked in their brain. So, look, you know, it's definitely some inspo there, I say.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like the Boys before the Boys was a thing. You know, that kind of. It's not even pretty anti-superhero. It's like, the dark side of superheroes, which is really fun.
Yeah, it was a pretty gritty show for the time. And then it got wrecked. I remember there was a writer's strike some time ago.
Yes, I do remember that.
And then all the series were just like, we're meant to be 10 episodes this season, but then we have to finish it up in 4. So then it kind of cracked everything, got a bit shit. Kind of done that Game of Thrones thing where it's like, we could go on, but we can't. So
yeah, for sure.
Definitely that bit of it.
So I've done like a little bit of an intro, but I think it'd be helpful just to have like a real quick background, I suppose, of yourself, and particularly your, I suppose, body movement practice over the years, and then we can start getting into some more nuanced things.
Cool. Quick rundown is I've always kind of done something, a lot of like extreme sports, a lot of rollerblading back when that was cool. Before,
yeah, even as a kid, were you particularly active as a kid?
I wouldn't. Let's say, so like I had my first pair of skates when I was age 4. So I've like always been kind of skating. I haven't done much, but kind of that. So then when like inline aggressive skating, like basically parkour and skates became a thing.
Yeah.
It was that for quite a while. There's a bit of like gymnastics in our secondary school PE program. So it wasn't like a formal, it was just like you'd go in and one of the coaches, so we had a rugby coach as a PE teacher and a gymnastic coach as a PE teacher. So depending on which one you had, one of them would pull out all the gymnastic stuff, trampolines, all that stuff to play on. The other one would
throw a ball.
Basically. Yeah, literally just throw a ball into the room and go entertain yourself. And then just go off. I'm pretty certain you probably had a drinking problem, but what PE teacher doesn't have a drink problem?
Have you ever played Mugby? Do you know what that is?
What's Mugby?
It's an Australian version of rugby where it's literally you throw a ball into a bunch of kids and everyone attacks the person with the ball, and then they let go of it and then another person gets it and you just attack them. So it's one of those like never-ending games. You just play until someone gets hurt or mum
we've
calls.
Definitely played versions of it. Yeah, there's definitely versions of that kind of game, and didn't know it was called something, but learned something new every day. Then done some martial arts when I was younger, not too much. I don't like some of the cool ones like Kempo, but now that I know a lot more about martial arts, it was a fucking joke. Like the guy was literally teaching you like grab the person's windpipe and tear it out, gouge their eyes, and then you're just like, for a 10-year-old, that was amazing. It's like, I could fucking kill a man.
Yeah, exactly.
But in reality, it's just like it was just literally pulled out of this guy's ass. It's like the guy, I even looked him up recently, and he's a character. Like he still does all the stuff, makes some dodgy videos of like him demoing like all these cool. Kempo was like basically American Kempo was based on some guys learned Okinawan karate. Yeah. During, after the war and during the kind of occupation of Japan or that kind of period. Then he came back, and obviously in that kind of 1970s dojo war era, just made it like basically like a martial arts movie. It's like, yes, go in, grab their throat, pull it out. When their throat is distracted, grab testicles, twist. Of course, they'll just stand there and take all this. While you're making noises, Bruce Lee noises and all this.
Yeah, and definitely the testicles after the throat grabbing, because they could still be alive.
Pull away from the throat, so then you need to show them like there's literally shit like that in it. It's like show them the throat afterwards.
He probably helped design Mortal Kombat.
It was basically I think I kind of got into it. It was around the same Mortal Kombat era, so it's like obviously fucking cool.
100%.
Then I got my ass handed to me by, I don't know, some weird, like me and my friends were playing one time, and then some like adults who were drunk decided to kick off on 10 or 11-year-olds, and we tried to fight back.
This sounds like Island.
Like literally fucking like. Yeah, just like, thanks. I got him put in a headlock and thrown to the ground by like a thing when like, I should have used this technique. I tried to do something like gouge his eye or something, just done nothing. So like, okay, that's great.
Well,
track those guys down. They're in their 60s now, so they kick the shit out of them.
At least you met reality in I suppose a non-life ending form, because there's certainly some people with a bit too much confidence out there.
Basically. So that kind of crushed that dream. Then after secondary school, I'd done theoretical physics and maths in university, but I got bored of that. So in the university we had a circus club. So I was part of that society, one of these university societies. So when I was in there, I started getting work just performing in nightclubs and other stuff through the society and student events. I was like, oh wait, I can get paid for this shit. This is so much better than maths. So then I dropped the maths and done one course in a place called Circle Media in Bristol, which is a 1-year preparatory course to apply to a circus university. Then I applied to what's called National Centre of Circus Arts. We're called Circus Space now in London. Done the degree there. Then I was working as a circus performer for a while. Then I broke my wrist badly. Well, it's one of those ones. It was like I broke the capitate in half on my rollerblades, as you do.
What's the capitate? I don't actually know.
Capitate's one of the small bones in the wrist on this thumb side.
Okay, cool.
And the problem with the capitate, it has the venous supply on it is on one side. So if it breaks in a certain way, it one side of the bone loses blood supply and then just slowly dies off. So I was kind of stuck. What should have been like a small, like the smallest bone you can break in your body, essentially. Not even an important one. Well, obviously it's important. But then I was limited I couldn't flex or extend my wrist more than this for about 3 years. So that put an end to the acrobatics. So then I was like, what do all broke circus performers do? Become yoga teacher, Pilates teacher, or personal trainer. That's your choices. So I became personal trainer. I was always into training and researching stuff anyway, so it was kind of an easy transition.
Yeah. Can I ask you first? So one of the things about you is like you're incredibly elusive. It is very hard to find videos of you doing stuff. I managed to find one when you're doing I think it was called the Medusa or something with someone, another juggler, and you were doing like this complex pattern. And my friend Brendan was actually asking, what did you actually perform as a juggler? Like what sort of or acrobat, I suppose.
Juggling, acrobat. So done.
Did you perform
like,
one-arm handstands when you were doing them?
No, I was only see this is the thing. The handstands was like a hobby for me.
Gotcha.
Basically, in things. So I've done a lot of acrobatic basing, so partner acrobatics and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I was kind of, because I was the big dude in the circus school, I was the multifunction base, someone to do hand to hand.
Yeah,
I was the only one in the school who could base all this stuff. Someone to do
very in demand, I imagine.
Do that. And not too, in the first school I was in, is very in demand because a lot of people were into partner stuff. And then in the second school, it was, as and when needed.
Yeah.
And then with my ex many years ago, we were performing that kind of stuff as well. But then with juggling and other stuff, it's like my main specialization would have been, say, Diablo. I don't know if you know that. It's like big yo-yo that I do a lot of, or don't do this. Don't do it so much anymore. It's kind of these things. A lot of these things kind of like fade away. And like when I talk about my past, I don't really identify with that person anymore, which is weird, but I just don't.
Yeah.
So
I get that. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So then done a lot of like when I was performing in London, a lot of it was like corporate work. So London's very good for kind of corporate stuff like Christmas parties, after shows, nightclub, not so much nightclub, but like meet and greet for other stuff, and not so much like, say, stuff like Michael, does more theater work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of doing that kind of stuff. So there's nothing notable. Well, I've done one after party for Lindsay Lohan when she was in the height of her grand wrecking phase.
Yeah,
which was pretty fucking hilarious.
Did you score a bag? I remember you telling us, telling us, people listening to Handstand Factory, that story.
Yeah, because we'd done the meet and greet, so it was kind of one of those last minute gigs. I got called about like 8 o'clock saying, "Can you do this gig at 9 o'clock?" Which is kind of normal in London. Went down, done the meet and greet when everyone was kind of coming in. They had one of those, the walls where people stand in front with all the sponsors' names, and people. It was during London Fashion Week, and then, but the party was just like free booze, free everything. People like at that stage, like New York Fashion Week was on, and Lindsay Lohan was when she was like having drug problems and other stuff, and I think she's very well sorted herself out. So she didn't show till about 4 a.m, but everyone else was there. Just getting wrecked on free booze, and then they're just handing out, like, when you're leaving, you get a goodie bag of like, there's a bottle of vodka, some fancy cereal, a scarf from some designer, loads of random shit. I'm just like, and
so you use the vodka in the cereal, right? Like
that kind of thing. I think that was the implication. But that was a interesting one. They even had like some of the weirdest shit ever. They had like a group of I don't know the correct term, so please no one cancel me, but they had people of small stature, dwarfs, or I don't know what the correct term is nowadays, and I don't want to insult anyone, but they had them dressed up in like fetish wear, and they were basically running around, and basically they had all these super tall models, like a lot of women taller than me, and they're basically using their legs to pole dance. This was the kind of thing that the women had to put their legs up, and then these people would pole dance on their legs. And other shit, literally just handing out phones. Like they had iPhones, whichever was iPhone 4 or 5 back then. 3 or whatever, and just handing them out as like prizes.
Dang, like, that's wild, man.
Yeah, it's weird experiences in these kind of parties.
I imagine.
There's one that stuck in my head in terms of weirdness. Yeah.
Still working it out years later.
Just like a lot of other stuff as well. Like we're there with kind of a lot of Z and Z list celebrities or up and coming musicians and other stuff who are kind of new to the scene, and they thought it was just as weird as us because they obviously hadn't been to a lot of these kind of industry gigs.
Yeah.
They were like, we're kind of making a kind of colony with the circus performers, and like, trying to think of names of people. I can't think of names, but people are kind of a bit more known nowadays in the kind of grime and other scene.
Yep.
It's weird. And Lindsay arrived and clearly yeah, clearly having problems.
Yes,
And
yeah.
then disappeared like an hour later.
That's what you do. I suppose like early the 2000s, man. It's a wild time. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So after that, you, with the wrist injury and whatnot, you started getting more into the teaching side.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing. I was working as just literally as a normal personal trainer in a gym, paying rent for a space and just getting your own client base. So that was going pretty good. This was just when the movement sort of scene was just beginning, sort of tail end of gymnastics bodies, beginning of Ido Portal kind of era. And, word kind of got round. I don't know how. I didn't advertise any of this, that there was someone who could teach flexibility and handstands for adults in this place. So then I started getting more and more clients to that. Then I was like, okay, cool. This makes a bit to specialize a bit more in this. So specializing a bit in it. Then at the time, I was living in London, and me and my partner at the time, she couldn't get work there. So we decided to move back to Dublin. And then when I moved back to Dublin, I kind of just went, okay, let's just go for it. But a lot of it was like organic, because, a lot of the early YouTube videos that I made were just because like people were asking me questions online.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I can just make a video. It's easier just to do this. Here you go.
Yeah. I was trolling through some of your old Reddit ones as well. Yeah. Like Q&As and whatnot.
Yeah. Like I had an even older Reddit account that I nuked at one point. That was would have been around that time. So that kind of,
I mean,
so then just kind of started getting more and more people from that.
Yeah, I didn't catch this kind of fade. So I'm 30, right? So I'm I think about 10 years younger than you. So I missed out on a lot of, I suppose, maybe the more adult type forums and things like that. I knew of, I think it was just like the bodybuilding forums or bodybuilding.com or whatever. But there was a pickup artist group that I was part of in that sort of, I guess like late 10s, 2010 to maybe even a bit earlier than that. Yeah, it was mid 2000s. And there was a vibe, right? There was something about these forums which would just collect people in, and it'd be specialized on pickup artists or gold medal bodies or whatnot. And it was cool, man. It was cool. It was just a real great mechanism of congregating people of a certain type.
Yeah, exactly. It's the shift in the internet from persistent content to non-persistent content.
Yeah.
We're in this kind of non-persistent content era whereas someone would make some forum posts on any kind of topic like fly fishing, shooting, whatever you're kind of into. And you'd find a new form of a hobby you're into, and you suddenly have like thousands of pages of shit to read to catch up on.
Yeah.
Just like, good quality, or also some forums always have the dude who's into something ultra obscure, but it's like the best thing. And if you're not into it, you don't understand, because this is the best way to do things. And he's obviously writing thousands and thousands of words to convince you.
And it's even just the way they were set up as well. So I don't know if you've used Discord, but one thing I really dislike about it is it starts from the bottom, not from the top. I always loved going in those, initial forum posts about the intricacies of why you should wear this fashion. Day game versus night game or things like this. And it was, you'd just get, might have 100 pages and 50 posts a page. But if you wanted to and you were dedicated, you would read every single one. And you'd start to know like, oh, this guy's full of shit. Like I don't need to listen to this person, but this guy, he's got decent advice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that kind of, and then now like finding stuff on the internet, like someone puts a lot of time on their Instagram, they put up a really good post. You're like, I remember reading that post, I remember reading the text, but I can't remember the photo that went with it or the video.
Yeah.
I want to read it again. You can't find it. You can't even Google it. Like, it's just that kind of thing. All these systems are kind of locked down to make this constant churn of content, which I really despise.
Yeah, I'm the same with memes, man. I'm hoping this is where like the AI stuff will kick in, and I can be like, what was that video of the two guys who were doing some sort of capoeira type moves, backwards hat wearing, and they were just constantly circling? There's a real example I typed in. And of course I get like the most random shit out, which is not even helpful. And I tried searching that in Google or Instagram or, insert word, whatever. and I just, for the life of me, cannot find this video. And then, 5 months later, something randomly will pop up which is connected to it. It's like, shit, man, and I'm missing one word or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Shits me to tears.
Yeah, it's just annoying. So yeah, it's kind of like I'm kind of sad for the way the internet has gone.
Yeah, we'll
I want your focus.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is why it's really cool that you're doing like so many actual meetups and retreats and like that type of event where you do just congregate people, because that's one thing I've noticed recently, making some handstand friends within the last 3 years, and getting like a little core group here in Brisbane with them has been really awesome. And it's we try and meet up like every kind of Friday and Sunday.
Oh, nice.
And just do our little thing. And, some people will join in, some will, will come in maybe like once every 3 months. Some people is like, man, I kind of wish this person didn't show up anymore. But, it's that just concept of everyone getting together, which is really nice. I'm very the same with regards to the social platforms. Like, I use it to post for the podcast, but I don't have a personal one really that I use.
Yeah. It's kind of, I haven't posted anything to my Instagram other than reposting kind of stuff from work related things in quite a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of basically done, but that's the thing. I kind of have to relaunch and do some stuff just for work related stuff, but I'd be very happy if you could just disappear into the ether and just not.
Yeah. Well, this is where it's like almost disconnecting yourself from that online identity. So I've never struggled with someone writing a bad comment on the videos, or anything like that. Has just been even text messages from this guy I used to work with who didn't know I had the podcast. I told him about it, and he was just like super blunt, like, fuck, this is so unprofessional, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. I really don't give a shit. And it is that kind of disconnecting myself from the online. There's just, maybe luckily for me, I didn't get sucked into it from 2013 to 2019. I didn't have any, zero social media, and only kicked it off again for the podcast, to be honest. And just not having that. It's not part of me. There's no part of me on this internet facade of Kyrin. It's just I don't know. I just view it differently, I think, than most people tend to.
Good.
And it seems like you do as well, man. If you're not posting, I think that's almost like a great thing. Like, shit,
it's not something. It's not something that interests me.
For sure.
Unfortunately, it's that kind of thing. Like, you have to drink from the poison chalice a bit for work-related stuff and business stuff, which is annoying.
We'll get into it a little bit later with regards to like kind of overall philosophy, but there's definitely a bit of pragmatism in me where it's like the pragmatic thing to do is to do this. All right, I'll play the game. Like, I'm not above it. I'll get into the weeds, but I'll also have like a fucking mower with me so I can clear my path and not have to dick around in this jungle of bullshit. Actually, I did want, considering we're talking about this, so you've met a lot of people who've done all sorts of various movements over the years. And especially like with the coaching and whatnot, you're getting, I suppose, people who are, it sounds like you get a mix between relatively fresh people who can only train once a week and then, the dedicated, 6 days, 7 days a week type person. Why do people actually move? What have you got like an overall idea of what people move for?
This is one of the things. I think like it's always who are you speaking to and what do they actually think? Because a lot of people, when they come to a practice new, or even if they've done something before and they want to change to something else or try something else out, they just have a projection of what they think it is. They don't have any like grounding in reality. So then they're kind of relying on what other people are saying about it or what they've seen and what they think their projection of what it would feel to do that. So then they go in and they go, that looks cool. Like, let's face it, most people look at something and go, that looks cool, or that will fulfill a need, that sells something that I'm lacking in my life. So then they'll go in, they'll try it out, and then they'll see, does it actually do what it says or does it not? So, there is generally a need for people to move and do something. It's inbuilt into humanity. We're moving creatures like every other animal. So people are generally lacking it. But it is this kind of thing. Like if we look at just some stats, if I remember off the top of my head, now these might be outdated because I haven't looked at them in a while, only 20% of the population in the Western world engages in some kind of physical activity.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Dang.
That's everything from like golf to gym to swimming to a bit of running. And that includes like things like people, I'll do a 5K or a 10K kind of fun charity run every now and then.
Yeah,
whereas 80% of the population doesn't.
Yeah. I suppose that I guess I section that off by saying like, do you do something outside of getting to and from the shopping center or something like? Because everyone walks or most people.
I don't know. It depends on which country. If you're in the States, you don't walk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. I've never been to the States, so can't.
Even if you're like where we live, we're kind of out of the cities here. It's like, you need to get to the shops. You drive, 10-15 minute drive.
Yeah.
And but that drive, like the walk would be an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
So obviously you just drive it, and then you get to the shops, you go to the car park, you walk around the shops, and then you're, it's not that big a walk.
Yeah. So I suppose it's like it's an exercise that takes up time in itself. Like it's not doing it to do another thing. Yeah. Wow. 20%. Poof.
Yeah, it's pretty low. And it was 14% at one point. These figures might be outdated, but they were based on industry stuff around 2015, 2014.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's gone up, but you can see it in the Western world, Australia, Ireland, America. Like Ireland's the most obese country in Europe now.
Yeah. I don't know if Australia is. We held that title for a long time.
Same, like the States obviously has quite a big like juxtaposition. You have the very skinny people in the States and you have very fat people.
Yeah, the States is a weird place.
Yeah.
They got a whole lot going on there.
Yeah. So it is just like that kind of, people are becoming a bit more sedentary because, a lot of jobs aren't physical. It's like, I was chatting to one of the guys who lives near me. There's a lot of farming around where I live. And he was saying like, farming, it used to be the healthiest job. Like there's a couple of farmers around here in their 90s who, they're not doing a big farm, but still have, a couple of heads of cattle. One of them was out like cutting his lawn with a side, just like, not a small lawn, just like, I'm just going to cut my side in his 90s.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at a lot of the kind of,
you'd have to wear like a dark robe if you're going to do that.
Yeah. 40s or 50s. Like a lot of them are just, quite big dudes. They're not in shape, but he's just pointing out, it's like, back in the day when you were one of these older farmers, to go around your farm, you walked. You had a dog, got your sheep in or whatever, you walked along the ditches, maybe you dug some stuff out by hand.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. But now it's just like quads, tractors, big machinery. You just basically, if you're a farmer, a lot of the time, particularly if you're doing crop, you're just basically in your tractor all day, just driving around.
Yeah. And to be fair, like I always like to add this point. I think that's brilliant. The unnecessary cutting out of labor is to be applauded for humanity as a whole. But we also have this tendency to just go too far one way, and it's like,
no, definitely.
Yeah, let's cut out this annoyance. All right, we'll cut it out completely for everything. Do we need face-to-face interactions anymore? No, screw it. Let's just do everything social media, and devote all our time to it. So that's it. But correct. There is a I suppose that forcing aspect, which is sometimes necessary, right? 'Cause a lot of people don't actually enjoy the exercise, even the ones who are doing it, but they acknowledge, this is healthy for me in the long term. So
and that's fine. Like it's kind of all you want to do is go to the gym, do a bit of cardio, do a bit of weights 2-3 times a week. That's great. That's you can get a lot out of it. You don't have to have a practice. But back to the kind of why do people move? I really think it is like there's something starts the spark. Someone sees something. This is the power of social media. You get to see a lot of cool stuff, and you go, "Oh, that's cool. I want to try that out." Or you have some friends who get into it, and you go, "Oh, this person is an evangelist for this thing. Oh, cool. I want to try that out." and that kind of gets people started. And then what I find a lot of, like in like if we say movement with capital M as a practice, a lot of people, the turnover rate is about 3 years. People are kind of in and done in about 3 years and then find something else. And that's great. I think, particularly if you're a hobbyist who just wants to do stuff, keep healthy, do other stuff, then it's like, oh, I was doing movement for a bit, but then, it's like kind of the pipeline as I see it at the moment, though it's kind of changed a bit, is people do CrossFit and they get to a certain level of CrossFit and they're like, okay, cool, that's awesome. Now I'm going to do movement. They do movement for a bit and then they're like, oh, movement's fine. Now I'm going to do BJJ or climbing. That's kind of the CrossFit movement, BJJ climbing pipeline.
And it just keeps feeding in. Yeah. Well, I mean, I almost fall into that in a certain respect. So like just personally, I played soccer from 10 till 20. I started going to the gym and yoga at the same time, which, man, I lucked into that. My initial reasoning for doing yoga was to meet the girls, and it didn't help, man. Like it was just not a great environment for it. Mostly because of myself, but no one actually wants the kind of
the tight guy. You haven't got a man bun.
No, I was. I was 20 and just extremely socially nervous and trying to get over that. And so I actually was going to yoga, and then it actually really helped because 10 years of soccer football was detrimental to my hamstrings for sure because I barely stretched. And so doing that actually is kind of like locked in some gains, I guess, which make things a lot easier now.
Awesome.
But then I do gym and yoga for about 3 years, and then I kind of switched on to calisthenics with a little bit of handstands in it, and now I'm kind of in the handstand with a little bit of calisthenics sort of realm. And talking about kicking off that spark, man. So one day I was at this local park here in Brisbane, Raymond Park. No one ever really goes to it during the day. And this was about a year and a bit ago, year and a half, maybe 2.
Yeah.
And it was just me out there, and this random guy came up, and I'd set myself this goal of like just approaching random people and trying to make the most bizarre introduction that I could. And so I saw he was relatively flexible, and I was like, all right, I think I've got something here. So I basically went up to him and was like, hey man, have you ever seen that movie with Jackie Chan? And it's got this guy in it. I think it's The Drunken Fist, and the big bad boss is this guy who can do like a full standing split. I was like, I think you'd be good at it. Do you want to try it or something? Like, it was something along the lines of that. Anyway, it turned out I was chatting with Miguel Santana. I had no idea who he was. And then, of course, he proceeds to go and do this, amazing one-arm handstand work. And I was just speechless. I'd seen one-arm handstands before, and I was kind of probably getting along that way. But seeing that in front of me was just like, holy fuck, I need to do that thing. Whatever this is, this is what I want. So, seeing that, I've got that experience definitely of that, just something physical in your face. Like I don't know what this is, and how to get it at the moment, but I want it.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that a bit. I think two of my better students, Josh and Morgan, who are the casebook example of students who just literally do whatever you say and just train their asses off. Great. But when they first started training with me, they just wanted to do calisthenics, just wanted one-arm chin up, handstand, push-ups, planche, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, fine. And even with handstands, they're like, oh, we want handstand push-up. And they're like, well, can you do a handstand? Like, no, we can't, but do we have to be able to do a handstand? Like, well, it's kind of in the name. There's a bit of an argument over handstand training. They were skipping it and everything. Just I'm like, well, they're 20, 25 second kind of consistent. I was like, guys, okay, your goal is 5 handstand push-ups. If you can't hold a 30-second handstand, you can't do a handstand long enough to actually do 5 handstand push-ups. So that kind of thing.
They take 10 seconds anyway just to get one of them.
Yeah, particularly when you're learning them. It's you have to give me some handstands here. So they're doing a bit, but it wasn't part of they weren't into it. But they went on a cruise with their parents, and they had a circus troupe on the cruise. And the show was whatever, I didn't care too much about that, but they met one of the artists in the show, who was a hand balancer, and he was training just in the gym, in the cruise ship. They were training. They're like, oh my God, they came back and they're like, we want to do this. We've seen this guy and he could do all these things and he was flexible and blah. And I was like, okay. And then from that moment on, they're just like handstands. That's it. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. I get it, man.
Yeah.
Do you find anyone has that same sort of motivation for stretching and flexibility, and maybe mobility? If you want to do the definition between those two as well, it might be helpful as well.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is one of the ones that has a pet peeve of mine. I think I have a whole podcast on this, defining mobility. If you want to check it out, check it out. Shilling my podcast. Anyway, so the usual thing is like we have flexibility. Most people equate flexibility with passive range of motion. Flexibility is not passive range of motion. It is total range of motion expressed in different contexts. So we have four main contexts. We have static passive. We have basically, change the terminology, we have active, where you're supporting yourself. You have static active. You have dynamic. These are kind of a broad overview. People generally equate mobility with active flexibility, which is completely wrong. Whereas mobility in its original usage is the sum total of all your motor abilities. So this is strength, endurance, coordinated capacity, perceptive ability, all these kind of things. And that's what goes into your actual mobility, because we could use mobility, could be termed as short for movement ability or motor ability, not just active flexibility. So you see a lot of people going like, improve your mobility, and then they just do a load of active flexibility drills, which is part of it, but it's not. So this is one of the big pet peeves. So you'll see me and a guy, Dan Van Zandt, rant about this a bit online. Just like, no, you don't actually understand it. Like all of this stuff it's in the textbooks on flexibility and range. It's just like, these are your flexibility definitions. This is your range of motion. This is how we define it. This is how we assess it. And it's all the kind of same things. People go, oh, improve your mobility. And then it's just an active flexibility drill. And you're like, no, that's not. And then people go like, stretching is just passive, but mobility is active. It's like, no, it's not. This is completely wrong.
Yeah. So like maybe a highlight example of this would be, so if I was working on my flexibility, it doesn't need to just be static. It could be like
dynamic
a movement.
Or it could be ballistic. It could be training strength and range of motion. These are all things that you use and develop your range of motion. Whereas mobility would be like, oh, okay, now I need to put this into an actual environment and navigate the environment with it and find a way to actually utilize my range of motion in this. So an example would be like, I don't know, if we look at the perceptive capacities of these things, if I say just on pure movement ability, motor ability, walk around and navigate a space. Okay, you can walk around and do that. Okay, I'm going to put you in an unfamiliar space. I'm going to turn the lights off, and every now and then I'm going to do a big bang and throw something at your head. Okay, how are you going to navigate that space? Very cautiously. Oh, suddenly your tensor, suddenly your perceptive capacity is locked down, your actual movement ability.
Yep.
So these things go into it. It's like, oh, someone who, particularly when it comes to task regulation and other stuff, it's like one example I just remember very recently from our old house, which was on a farm. And I was there with three girls who, all of them do some kind of movement stuff. So we had one circus artist who performs in shows, is very flexible, which is not very fast. We had my partner who's done a bit of everything. And then one of the girls who's done a bit of martial arts. So we got into a field, and then it turns out the pigs were in the field. Now, the pigs are friendly, but they'll run over to you, and they're fucking big. Like big, I don't know, 200, 250 kilos of pig kind of thing. So they seen we were in this field, and they sprinted towards us. Now, I knew they were fine, so I kind of stayed there just to slow them down a bit. The three girls obviously panicked. One girl, so to get out of the field, there's one of these gates that's kind of horizontal bars. One girl, the more flexible one, they all ran at the gate at the same kind of speed, in a panic, without other stuff. The body repurposed exactly what motor patterns they hadn't gained recently to get out of the field. The more flexible, less explosive girl just kind of ran at the gate, and then lifted her leg and kind of just like melted through the gate in a kind of split horse stance hybrid tilt, just straight through the gate, through the bars, which are probably about like 10 inches apart. Yeah. My partner has done a bit more explosive, a bit more parkour stuff, just done like a vault straight over the gate, hand up on the vault, 1 foot over, boom, over. And the other girl who'd done martial arts, she just kind of fucking basically grabbed the top and just threw herself and then kind of like break fold out of it. And that's, you know, it's same task and same task completion. Field, gate, obstacle, get out of it. How do we do that? And we don't have a time to think like, oh yeah, I could think and then I could walk up this, or I could open the gate and close it. No. Body, short-term thing, have to get out of this in less than 5 seconds. How do I do it? Body repurposes what's available very quickly. So one of the things is like if you're doing all these mobility drills, using quotation marks here, active flexibility work, how does that actually translate to your task completion in your environment? Because if that doesn't actually translate, or if there's no way to actually bridge that gap of like, oh, we have all these cool things in the body, but we haven't actually introduced them in things that require perceptive capacity and high speeds or slow speeds or other stuff, or expressive capacities, then I can't actually repurpose them into that. And my body will just go onto default whenever adrenaline hits.
Yeah. I'm curious as to, so I get sticky over words as well, man. Like if the definition of some things, and especially if it's a buzzword, they shit me to tears. Previous examples have been pivot. I used to hear that one tons. Alpha is a recent one.
In the startup scene, chasing alpha.
Yeah, that's some good alpha there. But usually there's like a reason for it, or maybe it's kind of like just an ingrained thing, and I'm making associations with people who are showing characteristics which I perhaps dislike or I think is kind of iffy. What goes wrong, I suppose, when people mix up mobility or flexibility, or trying to showcase this or sell something, which is usually
basically like it's this kind of thing. We have to remember that we're trying to meet people where they're at. So, you know, if someone comes to you and goes like, oh, you know, comes for personal training to any trainers are listening, I've done this, and go, oh, I want to get a bit more toned and a beach body. You know, I'd just like to be more toned. So we go, okay, we know this person, they don't want to increase their muscle tonus, which means they're holding more tension. What they want to be is a bit leaner, get a bit more muscle, just look and feel a bit better. Yeah, we kind of know this is what they're saying. Whereas if like a trainer who has 20 years experience goes, oh, I want to get toned, I'm not going to take them serious, because they should know the words of the industry and use them correctly. Now, as our job as trainers is we can meet people exactly where they're at, because we need to be able to speak and explain to them in terms that they understand. So if someone goes, oh, I'm new to this, I'm coming from running, I want to work on my mobility. Okay, we have a bit of a chat, like what context is your mobility lacking, or do you feel it needs to be? It's like, oh, I can't touch my toes. Okay, maybe we need more flexibility work. I feel a struggle when I'm in the playground with my kids. Okay, we need to actually maybe not work on flexibility, maybe have enough of it. We need to teach you how to use it in the context that your kids will be going up and down to the floor, meeting the kids, picking something up, you know, doing that multiple times. So there is a context, and as a role of trainers to actually take the words that people have heard on the internet and go, what does this person actually mean? What do they actually want? It's like, oh, I'm doing BJJ and I want splits. You probably don't need splits to get good at BJJ. Maybe you need a little bit of splits, but you probably need a bit more active flexibility. You need to know how to hold those strong isometrics to kind of apply the anaconda, these kind of things. So it is a goal to
I'm imagining someone doing like a full splits in an actual scenario. So they try and get it. And I don't know about most others, but when I'm in like a full splits, right, if there's some extra tension going a different way, I am very unsure as to how my hamstrings are going to respond to that. So, you know, having a full splits in that scenario, you know, might not actually help you, because you're just putting yourself in a more vulnerable position.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. Like there is, you know, like I have seen people who've been like held in leg bars where they're just like in a split, and the ref's going to them. Like there's some video went around recently, and it's like asking the guy, "Do you want to tap? Are you okay?" He's like, "No, I'm okay. I'm okay." Just like letting the guy pull him further and further into it, and then he's just like gave him time to just think his way out. So you know, that's a good use of someone who has flexibility and is able to repurpose it into their discipline. Yeah. Versus someone, you know, I know a lot of circus artists who, if you put them too fast into a split, they'd freak the fuck out because they're not familiar with it. They're used to kind of going in a bit more slow, expressive manner. So,
Yeah.
it is context. Like this thing, flexibility and use of flexibility is context specific. So we do have to think about the context of usage as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I want to kind of transition a bit onto injuries, and this is going to be a thing that's going to occur tons of times because I really like rules of thumb in terms of just general things that someone who's it's what I look for a lot of times, and that's because I usually don't have a set teacher to teach me things. I for whatever reason, and there are some examples I can give. When I'm learning a new language, if I'm, interpreting a book for myself, doing a book review, physical training, I definitely am kind of the self-taught, i.e. I use lots of information from tons of different places and try and get these rules of thumb. So I'm going to ask you this all the time, even though I know a lot of what your answer is going to be is like the three W's. Yeah. But for like injury prevention, for example, what sort of like rules of thumb do you use if, and let's just use it in my case, I'm going for one-arm handstands. I want to get pretty good at them. I'm kind of like, fingertip support at the moment, that sort of thing. What would you suggest for someone who's in that kind of level?
Load
we'll go with that for the moment. Yeah.
So the number one thing, like someone going from a 2-arm handstand to a 1-arm handstand is basically you're going, I've got, say 65% of the weight, 35% of the weight, 80% of the weight, 20% of the weight, 90%. But then suddenly you go into 100% of your weight on one arm. And suddenly you go from a position that has stability to one, once the hand comes off the ground, you're into one that has essentially no stability in some of the directions. So it can rotate. So suddenly you're exposing the body to a huge amount of stresses that you didn't actually think you would deal with. Because instead of like a normal 2-arm handstand, we fall forwards or backwards mostly. It's very rare that you'll fall sideways. A little bit when you're learning. And then you go, okay, I'm on one arm. All my training has been in this plane. It's been stacked. It's been balanced. And then I take the hand off and suddenly I have all the directions. So we have 6 directions. We go lateral, lateral, forward, back, and on the diagonals and anything in between. So then we have a huge amount of corrections and other stuff that are exposing stress to the fingers. The other thing is your balance capacity is not good enough to stay on your balance point when you're learning. You will fall. And learning the one-arm handstand is learning just to fall slower, fall slower, fall slower, till eventually it looks like you're balancing, but you're just falling very slowly in all directions. But when you're doing that phase, you begin to expose the hand to much bigger stresses because instead of correcting with like, I'm doing my 2-arm handstand and I'm 50% of my weight in each hand, I'm correcting in one direction. Suddenly I'm correcting on this side of my pinky and I got 100% of my weight and it's providing a large torque across it.
Yeah.
So what people tend to get is they have, because obviously you need it. You need a lot of capacity in the shoulders and the push and the other stuff that you feel it and we built it in this static plane. But then when we change it to this more dynamic thing where you have to rapidly correct, suddenly you're putting like 100% of your body weight is falling in one direction. You have to stop it, kill the moment of inertia, stop it, change the moment of inertia and put it back into balance. So load management becomes a lot and always just like doing this is the thing, depends on the person. Some people I'll have to say do more, but most cases I'll say do less. You have to be very strict on your stuff, like where I'd, so I had one client last year or the year before who was just getting his one arms. He's very, very strong dude, very, very good body type for one-arm handstands, very flexible, very, very coordinated. But he blew his wrist. I was like, what's going on? It wasn't badly, but it was like, my wrist is, forearm is up. I was like, okay, we'll go back off the training. And then it happened again. I was like, okay, what's going on here? Like, let's have a call. Let's talk this through. I'd set a very strict time block in this training. It's like, you're going to attempt one-arm holds for 15 minutes and 20 minutes was the kind of upscale. So small increase in volume. Which is just to try as much quality attempts as you can, rest well. And then I was kind of chatting to him. He's like, but I'm getting the one-arm handstand. I'm doing it. So I just started doing an hour. So he tripled his time on his hands. And that happens a lot as a coach, because a lot of times with a coach, if you're working with a good coach, is they're not giving you options, they're taking away options. We're basically saying, no, these are the exercises you need to work on. We've done an assessment. We know what we're doing. We're just going to do this. This is what you're going to do. Or this is the amount of training I want you to do. Because we know if you do too much, you're going to blow yourself. But people tend to go like, do that. And then they don't tell you.
Yeah.
Like, it was working. So I just had to do it more because, it felt so good. And this is the thing. And, you understand that you have to work long on it. But increasing volume and understanding that, like, even though something might feel a bit easy or not be too taxing on the body, it can be very taxing on, like, the smaller structures. So just accepting, like, when things are working, not to chase the dragon and not to constantly just go like, nearly got it.
Yeah, I've got this throwing my hand up guilty over here. So about 4 months ago, I basically I'm going to blame my friends because they were joking around how they were saying their tendonitis was kind of like gonorrhea, and it was just, if you accidentally touch elbows, you transfer it on.
Yeah.
And motherfuckers, they were right, because a month later, I start getting something flaring up in my right elbow, and yeah, this has been like kind of, hanging around for 3 or 4 months. And, I do small management things like, all right, I'm only just going to do left arm work, and, I'm not going to be putting all the weight on the right, that sort of thing. But there is this struggle to just go like, you know what, it's probably good if I just leave it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and just do nothing. Yeah. And today, for example, I've actually set it in my February goals. So for that episode will get released after this, but one of them is absolute adherence in restricting elbow pain. So like if the elbow is painful at all, like it's one of my goals to be like, no, just cut it dead. Whatever you're doing, just do some squats. It doesn't matter.
No, you can still this is the thing. You can still train. I think you should train when you have tendonitis, but we do have to like look at, say, handstands in a sports sciencey manner, where we have general physical preparation. We have a general physical preparation of the body to prepare it for what's coming. Then we have a specific physical preparation, which is a specific tools and the thing we're trying to train for. But if we overexpose the body, tendonitis is a case of overexposure. You've done too much training. The body has got an inflammation response to that training. It's an adaptive response. It's completely normal. But if you go, I'll keep doing the exact same thing, obviously we're loading the same way. Whereas if we go, actually, maybe I'll just do some other wrist training or hand training, that might be a bit sore, but not in the same threatening manner as the handstand, then we can generally get around it or recover faster or build a bit more capacity for when we come back. So this is one of the reasons, like, we have the grip program on Handstand Factory.
Yeah, I've been using that recently.
Made it free. It's just like, okay, it's general physical preparation for the forearms. It's not handstand specific. You could use it for bodybuilding. You could use it for climbing, whatever. It's just like, okay, we're just going to bring the wrist through all its range of motion in a classic strength training manner, where it's like, I do 12 reps. I use 8 kg. Okay, I can do my 4 sets of 12 reps. Then I'll use 10 kg. Maybe I'll do 10 reps. I'll build it up. Exactly linear progression, which can be missing from a lot of our training when we're working on a skill.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've been using that recently for the left to be like, all right, make sure if these two elbows accidentally touch, I don't want it spreading. But for me, in my case, it was because I was doing a shit ton of handstand push-ups and as many pull-ups as I could, and muscle-ups, and push-ups, and dips. So like all bent up stuff got thrown out. And you're absolutely correct. Like even playing around today, I was noticing like it feels fine with a tuck or a pike position. Like it doesn't hurt at all. Whereas even just getting up into like a straight standing, it's one of those ones where it's like right on the borderline for me of, is this painful or is this not? Yeah. And it's like, all right, I'm just gonna cut it here for at least a week and see. But good. Yeah, I didn't get you on just to diagnose me either, by the way. It was just coming up with stuff. I always have this argument with my friend Juan, he's definitely more of like a go-getter mindset than me. I'm a lot more passive in many ways, less assertive and things like that. And we're having this argument on someone who's getting to like an elite level, or even let's just say advanced. If you're looking for like longevity, or being able to perform over the longest length of time, or do whatever it is that you want over the longest length of time.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on if you have a niggling injury like what I've got, letting it fully heal versus kind of working your way through the pain, which I know it doesn't have to be either one or, but do you lean on one side or the other?
Once again, that's it depends.
I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because when we're dealing with injuries, like generally we have to find a way around it. It depends on like the degree of limitation from the injury, because like some stuff, like yes, you're doing a highly specialized activity. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be playing rugby. It could be, once you're into a specialized sport, it's specialized and it will accumulate injuries that are kind of go along with that sport.
Yeah.
So there's catastrophic injuries. I was running and I sprained my ankle, or someone tackled me really hard. I got kicked to the head and that's put my jaw out. That's catastrophic. But then we have ones that go along with the training. So one, if you're working as a coach or other stuff, you have to begin to understand that like at this stage of training, people will tend to develop tendonitis. Like it's just a known thing when people are learning one arm handstand. So then having the controls in place, load management, a very basic thing of like, increasing volume, or understanding when you increase intensity. So I'm going 4-finger support, straight arm support. I don't need to do more sets. I don't even need to do more hold time. I need to do probably a bit less to give my body a chance to get used to that increase in intensity of loading. And then I can increase it down. So it can be this thing. It gets unsatisfying for the trainee in some ways. Like, we're doing 10 sets of 15-second 4-finger support. So I got that up to 25 seconds. But now we're doing straight arm support and he's put me down to 3 sets.
Yeah.
But these are kind of necessary things. And this is the advantage of the coach more than anything else, is the coach will go, okay, yes, I understand the loading, intensity, volume, and I understand how the mechanics of a movement change when we increase something. So then it's like, okay, well, this is a 15% increase in intensity. I need to reduce the volume of training. So we can't just say do the exact same number of sets and reps. I need to reduce one of them to allow for that increase. So my total training tonnage is maintained within the zone that I know the person is able to, has the capacity to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. This gets us right into like teaching, and I was actually thinking, how much of the coach's responsibility is this almost? It's not even about the info you provide, because you've talked about this many times, where it's those genetic freaks, like you can chuck them in a locked room and with some weights or a stick or something, and they'll come out really damn good. How much of your coaching do you think it's actually related then to? It's almost like these psychological things outside of the actual physical stuff. I'd
say that's actually the main kind of thing I specialize in, is dealing with people's psychology and assessing that, and understanding what sort of person we're dealing with, and understanding what their values are, what they actually want to achieve through the training. How can we actually prescribe that? What do they actually want to do versus what they're actually capable of? And what is their own self-image in themselves in relation to this? And then how do we actually integrate this? And then how do they need to be spoken to actually get the message across? That's, this is the kind of thing, what I say to people is like, when someone starts working with me directly, I'm not your coach, I'm your consultant. You come to me, you tell me information. I will give an intervention based on this information. What I think is a guess. Every program that any coach ever makes you is a guess based on the information they have, particularly when they're starting. We will see how you work with this information I provided. Your role, so this is I just on this kind of covered this in the activity theories, the separation of work or the division of labor in a training situation. The person will implement the training plan as best they can. Then they will come back to you and go, I have done this plan and this was my results. They were good. Awesome. We'll keep doing it. We know that. This improved, but that didn't improve. Okay, I need to do this. Okay, I tried this. And in terms of, say, weight, it's okay, but I can't coordinate my body. Okay, these kind of things. And getting this kind of information, or, it's the classic one is like, oh, I want to do loads of training and I have my 4 training sessions a week and it's great. But then I had to work an extra 10 hours in work this week. So I got a big report coming in. One of my kids was sick. So I was up kind of 3 nights a week. Okay, well, but I can still go to the gym. I was like, well, you're approaching 40. Maybe I need to tell you, you're going to do a bit less in the gym this week. These kind of things that on paper, it looks like, oh, I could go to the gym for my 4 1.5 sessions. That's fine. But actually outside of life, all the other stuff that the person mightn't consider, these are the division of labor. It's like, I will consider them for you and go, what do we need to make? What adjustments do we need to make on the fly? So generally I say to people, the program you get on the piece of paper or the PDF or whatever software you're using at the time, that's about 20% of the coaching. The rest is the relationship with the coach. And this goes in any kind of coaching situation. I'm not saying I'm super special. It's just, as a coach, our goal should be to get into this person and give them what they need at the time that is correct for what actual situation they're in.
Yeah. Do you find that changes depending on their experience? So for the newcomer versus the super experienced one, does that percentage change at all?
No, it's still the same. It's just with someone who has more experience, they have more resources to draw on to give you information. Yeah. So and then it can become a bit more like, so I'll have some clients and they're just, they have the program, they have the things I want them to work on that I have selected as like their special stuff. But then I know bicep curls or big calves are important to them. They want to have bigger calves, they want to have bigger arms. So then I know, okay, this person's been training for 8-10 years. I'll just program in like pick 4 bicep exercises you want to do and just pick your favorites and just do them. You can do that. Or if someone doesn't know any exercises, then it's like, well, I'll teach you some exercises. I'll be a bit more strict on like, I want you to do these ones. I want you to learn the technique of them. So we can have there is a bit of changing when someone is completely new to discipline. We have to teach them the implicit knowledge of the environment, how to actually train, what's important, what's not important, which is the majors, which is the minors, all these kind of things. But then when someone has a bit more experience, it becomes in a bit more of a co-creative process where you can go to them and go like, okay, your handstand push-up isn't working as well as we think it should. It didn't improve as much as it should the last couple of weeks. What do you think is wrong with it? And then they'll be able to go like, oh, I feel when I push out, I flare my elbow on the right side and it loads, and go, well, I seen that in the video. I don't think it's important. I think something earlier down the chain is causing that flare. What do you think about this bit? Do you feel that? And they go, oh, yeah, I feel that. So there is, as people get more advanced, it's consulting. First level of consulting, it's like, I'll tell you exactly what to do and you have to implement my plan. Next level of consulting is like, you know what you're doing in this environment, but something's not working too well. Let me come in and make it more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. I always find it interesting, this, I suppose, balance of knowing information. You talked about the real experienced people, and the good thing with them is they can hone in on that particular detail, which, the real newcomer might be like, I don't know, my back hurts, whereas it could be, this particular exercise does this particular thing, and it's not even necessarily pain. It's a discomfort rather than pain, or et cetera, et cetera. It's funny, like little story from me. So when I was doing yoga, I used to just do it basically like as a warm up before my gym session, because I was 20-year-old and I could do that. Although I did that recently as well, so I guess I haven't changed that much. And what I would do is like I'd just go to the UQ gym, so University of Queensland, and they just had random yoga classes there. It was part of the gym itself, so you didn't have to pay extra. When I moved away and I started the next year, and I started kind of proper work, and moved to a new place further up north, and I was going to a dedicated yoga gym for the first time. And I remember just telling the teacher at one point, like, oh yeah, no, I actually do some gym stuff as well. Like that's kind of like just part of what I'm training. And her reaction, and I don't know if this is good advice or bad advice, but I had at that time kind of gained a lot of confidence from actually putting on some muscle for the first time in my life. Like I was always super skinny. I'm still relatively skinny now, but you know, anorexic type, concentration camp skinny.
Yeah, I get you.
And her advice was like, oh, this kind of disdainful, oh, you don't want to go to the gym, like it makes your muscles too tight. It's like it hinders your flexibility. Like if you go into the gym, it's almost the opposite of the one that pisses you off, which is stretching makes you weak. It's almost like getting too strong will affect your stretching. And just that advice at that time was just not what I wanted to hear. And it's almost irrelevant as to whether it was good advice or not. It was like she didn't know all the internal psychological things which were helping me at that time as to why my motivation for going to the gym. So it's funny, like seeing, and hence also part of the reason why I don't particularly use teachers per se is kind of that. It's kind of like who can know me better, and if I'm willing to put in the time and create a plan or whatnot, no one's going to know me better than me. Like and God, like even I don't even know myself that well. There's so much bullshit that goes on in my own mind.
This is the kind of advantage of a coach. They should know the right questions to ask to get the information.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the soft side of coaching. It's like, okay, you know, what's going on, or how are you? Other stuff the stuff that happens in the conversations between sets is probably more important than counting the reps. Like if someone's counting the rep, I don't count reps. I just straight up just tell people I'm not counting reps. That's your responsibility is to do it.
Yep.
And you know, other stuff, but I look at the technique. But then when we're chatting between the sets, like that's when you get the actual real information. That's when you want to think. That's when you start like, someone says something offhand. Like just as a weird example of this, I remember when I was working in normal personal training, I had this woman who was coming to me. She was about 5 foot, 150 centimeters, maybe 5'2", kind of small, bit overweight, and her goal was to lose weight. And she told me, I've never been to the gym before. I don't do any training. Fine. Okay, we'll start at the basics. We're just going to teach you how to squat. We'll have a chat about diet. I was training her for quite a while. You know, it's lovely, getting results, getting stronger, blah, all the normal kind of stuff you'd expect. But at the start of every session, you know, people would say this is lazy, but I'd always start my clients on treadmill for 5-10 minutes just so I could talk to them. Just so I have them locked into a little coffin, essentially. I can ask them questions and just, you know, casually. But then one day she just dropped that when she was in university, now she was only out of university, I don't know, 6-7 years. When she was in university, she was on the Great Britain ski team for freestyle slalom. So I was just like, I was just hearing this, like, hold on, just banging the up harder button on the treadmill, like, just increase the incline while you're telling me this. It's like, what do you mean you were on the freestyle? Oh yeah, it's like went to the Olympics and, you know, Winter Olympics. Like, you never told me this. Why didn't you tell me this? You know, oh, I didn't tell you this because if I told you that, you would have made me train harder.
Yeah.
So, you know,
there you go. Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it's like, oh, these kind of things. So it's just like, you know, and I wouldn't have gotten that information if I just went in, this is your plan, immediately go into this plan, and I'm just going to count the reps and we're just going to do this and go through. Whereas if you have that kind of interrogation and you get to the point where the person's comfortable divulging this information to you, then that's when you get the actual stuff.
So did you make her train harder?
Well, like her training plan was adequate for what she was doing. Like, you know, I don't think she'd done much weights in that. You know, she done a lot of skiing and other stuff, but it was just kind of.
Well, the valid thing is, like, she probably has had coaches who are ridiculously, well, look, maybe not, but I can imagine being at a super high level, there are super people who are very strict. You know, you need to do this, being on your back, and if she's worried that that's what could occur right off the bat with you, that's actually somewhat understandable. I can kind of get that.
It's totally understandable, but it was just like,
the whole scenario of how it occurs, for sure.
Just just dropped it in. It's just like, oh, when I was at the Olympics in wherever it was at the time, I was like, what do you mean? Oh, you went to see the Olympics? Oh no, I was competing. What? Tell me more.
Yeah. Oh man, people are awesome. I love the variability of what you can find out with randoms. This kind of gets onto influence and your own style, and I'm curious as to like what resources you use to kind of guide how you coach and teach, and where you get your information from as well, because that can be pretty complex in today's day and age with the barrage.
Basically,
books, podcasts, hieroglyphics, word of mouth. Where do you get your
information
juice from?
So a lot of the time I like avoid the industry in general. I know it sounds weird. I just avoid it because the information isn't actually digestible. So when I was first like learning all this stuff, textbooks, people don't understand how valuable actual textbooks are. So I was consuming textbooks. Like I have a very fast reading speed, and once I get into something, quite excessive. So at certain points, I was reading like, I don't know, 6 to 1,000 pages of textbooks a week. Just get them out of the library.
I literally have algorithms for dummies here. I'm trying to learn a little bit of Python.
Nice. Yeah, this kind of thing of just like, okay, I want textbooks, because if we look at, say, a university level textbook, or even a more simplified one, you have someone who's actually gone through all the studies and other stuff and put it into a digestible form. So there's kind of this push, like what I call PubMed gladiators on the internet, where someone comments something, they just comment PubMed ID number, and then they'll comment a study where they just clearly read the title or the abstract and not actually read the study. They don't like, reading a study is complex. I was in university for physics and maths. Like I understand statistics. I know how to read a study. I know how to do data sets. I can program in Python. I can use R, all these kind of things that most people in the industry can't. And then they expect like, oh, this study says this abstract. And you're like, well, actually, if you read the study, it doesn't actually say that. The conclusion of that, or the effect size is irrelevant. So you're not actually saying anything, or it doesn't apply to this, whatever. But textbooks are better because they're more digested forms of information where you can go like, okay, I want to learn endocrinology. I'll get endocrinology textbook for second year university. I'll read that, and that will give me a very good broad basis of the topic. Then if I need to learn more, I can get a bit more specialized. And this is more important. It's what's lacking in the industry. I think a lot of people like don't, but when I first started learning about fitness and other stuff, like going back to like 2000, 2001, the only source of information was kind of like T Nation. It was the best game in the town, for better or worse. But there was a push on the forums of T Nation for the coaches that like you'd had to read Super Training, you had to read Zatiorsky. There was kind of flex that you'd actually read these textbooks because they're fucking hard to get through. And then once you get through them, you go, okay, I've got an actual good basis on this stuff where I can actually assess a study, or I can read up the studies that they use to back up their points, and not actually just go PubMed. I'll search up something on PubMed and that proves my point, because most of the time it doesn't. We have to look at like an aggregate collection of data. So anyone listening who wants to go in is like textbooks. Get your textbooks from your library, university library, even like charity shops, or like, what is it, Vinnie's in Australia?
Yeah.
Where you just like, you'll find people dump textbooks and just read them. That would be my best advice for most people. In other terms, like a lot of stuff we do now, because in my own system, I like to think I pushed it beyond what the research says. So now we're actually just doing our own research. So I'm going to be doing a doctorate starting this year. So I'm doing a doctorate in flexibility. So then I'll be able to actually validate my own research and or the stuff we're doing in practice, and go, is this actually better? And stuff, we'll actually have controlled studies on that. So give me another 3-4 years to finish that, and then we'll be able to go, okay, that and other stuff. So we've got this, but I wouldn't have the background to be able to actually think about going into this high level academic research without actually going through, basically giving myself a degree in the manner that a good degree would be done through textbooks. Obviously lectures weren't present, but there is that kind of source that if you go through these things, you'll have a better, if you were to replace all your reading of people's opinions and programs and other stuff on the internet with textbook reading, you will be a better coach.
Yeah. And the university system itself can, I'll just give my example, which is I got an engineering degree, and the reason I got it was because I'm good at knowing what they want. So I actually didn't learn that much. I just played the game well. Yeah. You want this, you attendance at this lecture, you fucking better believe I'm going to be there. You want this tutorial done? I'll do this tutorial. I will learn exactly what I needed to do to get good at the tests. And then all etc. knowledge outside of that just get flushed. And it's kind of similar for work. You get into the workforce doing mining engineering, and it's like, oh, I actually didn't need to know 95% of this. And I get it. You know, it's an imperfect system. Sometimes a lot of it's just a weeding process out to make sure you're not got, you know, yahoos doing crazy shit with designs and big machinery and whatnot. So I get it.
That's like kind of like a bachelor's level degree. It's like it's meant to just teach you best practice.
Yeah.
This is best practice. You go, okay, I don't need to know all this hydro engineering for whatever reason. I just focus on this one thing. I learned enough of it to pass the test, but now the stuff I'll use in the real world, that's when you begin to get specialized and begin to actually know your discipline.
For sure.
It's like the same thing with like a lot of, you know, I don't know, the shit exercise advice you get from doctors who are meant to kind of know this, but doctors know medicine. They know medicine, they know disease. And that's what they specialize in, where people think like, oh, you should be prescribing deadlifts and other shit. It's like, no, if your doctor knows shit, they'll like, you know, they'll give you a referral to an exercise specialist or a physiotherapist who their job is to know the exercise referral and other stuff.
Definitely.
So it is this kind of like knowing when to pass the book or knowing what you need to know.
Yeah, that's a big one. Hey, not stepping too far outside your zone of comfort. And it's a hard one, especially for me, because this podcast is so general, man. Like I get on just people who I find interesting, but there is that aspect of knowing when to stop, even though talking is super fun. Sometimes it's like, all right, I gotta just
definitely coaches as well. It's like one of the things I always encourage anyone who comes to me for a more teach me to coach relationship is to have a network of people who are trusted for you to refer people to. And that's, you know, because we always try, there's kind of like the fantasy in the coach is like, I'm a coach who I can fix your pain, I can fix your bones, I can tell you exactly how to eat, I can be a therapist, I can, you know, be your orthopedic specialist, I can be your blah. We can't do everything. Like I think as a coach in these kind of direct physical or face-to-face confrontational type situation, using confrontation not as a confrontation, but, you know, me and you in a conversation, I should be the one to go like, okay, I can help you a bit with this. If it doesn't work, I know this great physiotherapist. And that speaks a lot of someone's confidence because they go, I know who you need to go to. I'm like a general physical practitioner or a GP type doctor. I'll come in, I'll assess you, I'll triage you, and I'll go, okay, yeah, I can help you with that. No, that's a bit outside my specialist. We're going to send you to the heart guy because he's the specialist. And it's the same with someone who's like, you know, talking about like, oh, they're doing the training, but they're a bit depressed and they thought training would make them a bit better. They're not. I was like, well, you know, sounds like you've got a lot going on. I know this great therapist. You want to go talk to them? Maybe it'll help you. Oh, cool. Thanks for the referral. And that, you know, is very powerful. Like this is the kind of thing people always think like, oh, if I send this person out to the physio, blah, 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 they're not going to come back. They're just going to do physiotherapy. Most people, if you're confident enough to go, will stick with you. And this is one of the bigger things people need to get away from is like stop trying to fix everything. Like there is a lot of stuff we can help people with. But at the same time, we do have to know like, okay, yes, this is outside it. So we'll send someone out. And then the other thing is like, once you have this good trusted network, like I have a couple of physiotherapists and different type of therapists that I'll refer people to. Then I can go, okay, I sent you over, Dave, you know, what's up? What should I do? This is what I'm doing in training. Do I need to alter stuff or do I need to other stuff? And they'll come back with a recommendation. So then you have this training constellation. And if we look at like getting someone to peak performance, whatever the peak performance is for their level, we look at any Olympic athlete, they have a team. You know, they have dietitians, they have physios, they have specific coaches for discipline, they have strength coaches, they have endurance coach, you know, they have coaches for everything. And this is how you get someone to peak performance. Usain Bolt, you know, he's fastest man, whatever. I know he's not competing anymore. But he didn't just like turn up at the track every day and just run himself and just keep running and run till he got faster. He was obviously picked as a talent. But then he had this whole team of people behind him that was actually able to get him from just being a talented youth all the way to this like fastest man on the planet at the time.
Yeah. But he ate chicken nuggets before his race, so therefore you can do anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then like this is
the trusted network that I think that's bang on, man, because it's so, like I said, I don't have a a teacher per se, but I have many. And so,
Yeah.
And it's, I suppose, using your own judgment, and this is just my methodology for anyone who's interested, is I try and pick what I think is suitable for that person as well. So it's using a little bit of common sense. So when I'm listening to you, and recently I've come across a couple of things where you're saying like, you advise people not to really do or try and get a one-arm chin up. If they really want to, go for it. But do you really need it? Like what's the real desire for it? Because there's a good chance you'll get hurt from it. And I take that and I go, okay, I have seen someone like Tom Merrick talking about one-arm chin-ups before. In this case, I'm probably going to lean more on the Emmet side because he knows a bit more about injuries and whatnot. But I'll use Tom Merrick because his body type is super similar to mine. Yeah. And so I can take a lot of, great things from that. Much like Daniel Vadnal, Fitness FAQs, he's got really great videos. And so particular things related to the pike push-up or whatnot, I'll consume that. And it's this kind of conglomeration, this overall philosophy starts to seep in, which is hence those kind of like rules of thumbs I like to use. Yeah,
I would just like to flex to say Tom has been a student of mine for quite a while.
Yeah, I know. The first time I heard about you was through one of his YouTube videos. Oh, nice. And I don't think I ever actually saw you. I just heard him talking about you, and he's saying like the splits wizard. So I was just imagining this really old dude with a beard. And I mean, you did have the beard going on. So I don't know, you're not as much a wizard anymore. You've maybe been demoted to mage.
Too many people equate the beard with being a guru.
Yeah, right. Yeah, especially when you had the man bun. Although you could be hiding it under that beanie, I'm not sure.
No, it's just shaved head at the moment. Yeah, kind of had to ditch the beard for reasons that were.
Oh yeah, I'd semi-longish beard for a while. I grew it out 6 months. It got too much. Yeah, the maintenance of those things. This gets into like the suppose more ephemeral side of stuff, which is what I was really looking forward to, but I wasn't sure if I should put it right at the start. So you have to sort out a lot of BS, especially with the physical movement stuff. I mentioned one before, stretching makes you weak. But I also know that you're really into Taoism. You definitely got a spiritual and sort of esoteric side to you. How do you balance those or section them off, or overall philosophy? Like this kind of conflict between science and also the unverifiable things, if you want to put it that way.
Well, and I know for yourself, things are unverifiable. So I suppose we have to give a bit of background here before I start talking. So I am an instructor in a school of Daoism called Men Da Xuan under term. He hates the term, but Master Serge Auger, who is the teacher in it, who's a guy from France.
Yep.
And in the school of Taoism, it is immensely practical. This is the kind of thing, even if we talk about things that sound a bit woo or esoteric, Serge's manner of teaching and the way we instruct it has to be real, and it has to just be very simple. It can't be, I can't even think of an example. It has to be very practical, because at the end of the day, the people doing all this practices, there are practical people living in a real world, living in a time where it was possibly harder to survive than us. So you can't be telling them you need to, particularly for our tradition, we're a tradition in the world, we're not a monastic tradition. You have to be able to go like, okay, you have a wife and kids and a job, and you might need to stab someone to death once or twice a year because there's raiders in your village. Okay, we're not going to tell you need to meditate 8 hours a day and tell you the body is horrible. At the same time, the tradition has a lot of tools that we have different maps, and we have maps of the mind and how all the conscious, the unconscious, the hyperconscious, all of these work and integrate together. The other thing is a lot of the stuff that we have is beginning to get verified by science. So there's always this push for like secular mindfulness, like cultural theft of Buddhist practices, basically. But people are testing in the lab and they're like, oh, it actually kind of does this thing. It's like, yeah, well, we had this in our text 1500 years ago. It does do this thing. We know this. So we're actually, in terms of like any kind of practical discipline that begins to get research, strength training, look at strength training and sports science as a discipline. It didn't really happen until the Soviets start doing it, and then the West decided to catch up. But people were lifting weights, getting bigger and training for 80, 90 years beforehand. going like, this is what we do and it works. And then people are saying, no, it doesn't work. And then they go, oh, wait, we tested it out and science has verified that it does work. So there is that side to the Taoist practices. Then a lot of what I do is informed because we have a split between the body, the mind, and the vitality. So the classic thing is chi, but I hate in these kind of contexts, I don't like using that word because chi, the simplest translation of it is vitality.
Yeah.
And if we look at the Chinese character of it, it has a bowl of rice. It has the character for rice and a character for air. So it's basically what you eat and how you breathe gives you your vitality.
Yeah.
And we notice if someone's a mouth breather, struggling to breathe, has shit cardio, and just eats McDonald's all the time, they're not going to be a very vital person. If someone is eating a diet that suits their body, they're eating enough food, not too much, not too little, they have a decent bit of cardio, you'll spot them. If you put like a few of these people in a line with a few of the other type of people, you'll go, okay, this person looks healthy, this person doesn't. So we can have these kind of interfaces, but then we have the interfaces between the interfaces. We have the breath that can link into the mind. We have the intent that can link from the mind to the vitality to the body. And then it always becomes this idea of what moves first is always an interesting question. You want to do a movement. What moves first?
Yeah, well, I guess it could be. I could make arguments, I think, both ways, where it's like the mind or the body, or like, it's the consciousness decides to make the movement. But I know tons of tests as well, which have been showing vice versa as well. It's like the body moves and the mind is kind of like following up afterwards.
Yeah, so you get reactions, you get other stuff. So that's always kind of interesting to understand that and have a map of how that works in the body, because that can actually inform how you're doing, because we have different rates of reaction. Like, oh, you touch something really hot, your hand moves back very quickly. You have that kind of startle reflex, which is one of the fastest reflexes. Like, oh, how can we repurpose that instead of just like someone throws a punch at your face? How do I end up here? How do I turn that into like my hand just comes out? How can we actually train the body to react in a non-reactive manner or a non-programmed manner? How can I make space? How can I make time? So this informs a lot of it. Then we have like maps of how all the different parts of the mind, the conscious mind and the unconscious mind actually work together and how they actually override or underride each other. And that begins to, when you start talking to someone, we have, I'm trying to see if I can hone down a detail. We have like basically say, I'm going to give a very simplified detail on this because it makes sense. So we have a map of what we call the human map, and we have the center, which is sort of the aggregate of all the things. And we split this into the wuxia and the 5 parts of the mind. That will give us, we have one part up above, the bit of us which is connected to everything else, the hun, the ethereal, the soul, the spirit, this kind of thing. But then on the other side of that, we have the po, which is the sense that you are separate from other things. So the po is what gives us our feelings like, I'm sitting on the floor. I know I'm not the floor. I know this is me. I know the limits of my body. The hun is that kind of thing where I can let go of the po and go that. On the other side of this, we have the yi, which is the thinking mind, and the zi. This gives us a cross axis. The thinking mind is the bit that is overactive in the West, where we can think, we can ruminate on stuff, we can mentally discuss things. I can see a movement, I can do it once, I can replicate it, or if there's a breakdown between my replication of what I think I'm doing and other stuff, we have a breakdown in the yi or a breakdown in our capacity. And then we have the Z, which is us going into action, continuous action. So these kind of things like, oh, I'm going to sit there, think how I'm going to throw a ball. Okay, yi. Something completely startles me, I throw the ball completely on reaction Z. So we have this idea. These also give us our willpower and our ability to not go into motion. Then these will all interact on the diagonals. And then we also have circles around them that integrate certain bits of the qualities of like the self, the vision of the self, like what I think I am, what my values are. And then we'd have my values in action in relation to a community. So then I go, oh, I think the environment is great. I think recycling is great. I think, blah, this kind of thing. But then in my values in action in the world, in relation to the world or into a community or other stuff, I throw my beer cans onto the ground. I don't recycle. I don't resort my rubber. So it's like your vision of yourself doesn't actually align with your coherent action. So if we don't have this, then we have a decoherence, which will actually limit your ability to be spiritual. So by understanding this kind of tool and these kind of maps, then we can actually go, okay, well, what's actually blocking this person? What blocks this person into action? Oh, we have a quadrant for relaxation. This person is relaxing. Then this relaxation diagonal, this would be related to 4 of the Gua from the I Ching. And this one will go, okay, we have, say, on the left side of the action, the one that is stopping this person relaxation, say 34, which is an idea of letting go. So this person has something in the past they're not able to let go of, and that's what's stopping them in this action. So being able to actually have a comprehensive map where we can plot someone out and then go, okay, this person, they're not fulfilling their values in society. Why? Was their values set by someone else? Did their values get set by their parents, by their school, by their friend group? Do they actually align with these values? They do. What's stopping them going into action? They don't have the tools and the systems in their life to actually put the values in action. We can help them with the systems. Or we go, this person's value, you interrogate and go, oh, they don't actually believe it, but they're just saying it because they feel like that's what they have to parrot in society.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of what you're saying there kind of reminds me of System 1 versus System 2 thinking, if you've heard of that before. Daniel Kahneman, I think it's, I don't know if it's behavioral economics or behavioral...
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's not exactly that, because that would both be 2 parts of the yi.
Yeah, gotcha.
So you have your, like, I can draw out and think out stuff, or I have to base on reactivity, whereas we're trying to get away a lot from reactive patterns. Or if we have reactive patterns, we've chosen to let them run.
Yeah. When I said unverifiable before, I'll make something clear. So I actually quite like Taoism and Buddhism in terms of religions as a whole. Those are the 2 I've definitely been drawn into. It's actually quite funny reading things like the Tao Te Ching, and I read it once when I was in my early 20s and was like, God, this is the biggest piece of shit I've ever read. and then came back to it a year ago and was like, oh, wow, there's a lot in here. Like, there's a lot to unpack. And I actually had 2 versions of the same book, of the translation. And one was, I think, by Stephen Mitchell, and it was a lot more of a rigorous kind of to the, how would I, maybe like, in terms of languages, there's like the literal translation, I suppose, more of it, and then another version. I can't remember who translated that one. Was a lot more of his interpretation of trying to get at the heart of what was trying to be conveyed. And language is really tricky with this because it can be so different depending on, Spanish, for example. I'm relatively conversational in that, and the differences between that and English, like I really get to see it. And a long way of getting to saying, I also like to go to the kind of more original texts when I can. So getting into, the Tao Te Ching. And I've got one here, which I read recently. This is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I've jumped into some of these old texts, and this is where I start to struggle with a lot of just religion in general, not even the Eastern religions, which is, if I go to a random page, it's talking about from the southeast, the yellowish white vulture-headed one bearing a gigantic human-shaped corpse on the shoulder and holding a skeleton in the hand from the south. And it goes on and on about these things which are like, I can't verify that. The only way to verify some of that is to die, and then go through the afterlife and experience that. And so there is this kind of and the way I grew up was I suppose an atheistic household because my dad used to be Seventh-day Adventist, and a lot of that is pretty hardcore. Earth is 6,000 years old. Women aren't allowed to wear jewelry. Just very, very fundamental, I suppose. And so I myself have this balance between, like, I really enjoy science and I use this scientific method, but there's a lot of science which you see with like the replication crisis and and things like that, where it's like, fuck me, Dad, it's hard to get a grasp on what is true. So yeah, what's true? What's
true?
Throw that on you.
Yeah. So I think this is part of the problem of stepping into these kind of streams, which are outside your own cultural context, that we have.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
you say, even reading the Tao Te Ching or other Chinese texts in the Dao Zhang, the texts are basically encoded because the words actually kind of mean something to the practice. So the practice has to be immensely practical. So when, say, there's one that's getting a bit more popular, the Bao Pu Zib in Nepan. So the master who embraces simplicity, the inner chapters, which informs the Ling Bao sect of Taoism. And the text is like, you've seen it kind of doing circles where it's like, oh, it has these talismans and it has these kind of advices when going into the mountains to keep yourself safe from animals.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Wear these things on your belt. But it's not actually really talking about going to a mountain, because the mountain is actually the representation of the actual practice. And the mountain is what the way is along, the Tao is along. So you have to go to the mountain, which is going to your practice. And then if you're doing your practice, which could be, say, I think the context in this one is a sitting practice, you'll be attacked by animals. Oh, what is the animals you're being attacked by? Oh, maybe they're your own thoughts. Maybe they're your own traumas coming up in the practice. And then, oh, these talismans are actually kind of a symbolistic language of telling you what to do when you encounter this type of thought. So this kind of thing, and the Tao Te Ching itself is a practical book. It's actually a whole practice in there. But it's a personal thing. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's what we call the way of abandonment. And this kind of thing of giving you an idea of where your placing is and how you actually abandon, which means not abandon, but it's a good translation, these things to actually get through yourself. Because Taoism, mostly spiritual practices, is a path of removal. We're not trying to add stuff in. We're trying to get all the shit that's been layered on off so you can just be natural. Whereas people interpret this like, oh, Wu Wei, just go with the flow. That's not really it, because Wu Wei and Ziran in Taoism, it's a concept where you have purified. So you basically removed as much of the shit, your emotional trauma, your baggage, your shit thinking, the stuff that's put on you by your parents, society, and other stuff. And then there's only yourself. And then you've trained your physical capacities in line with what we think are physical capacities to their maximum or best they can. Then the naturalness can come out. It's a trained naturalist. It's not like the naturalness of a baby who doesn't know anything. So that's useless. You just get eaten by wolves. It's a kind of training that it can actually emerge. So it's the same with Wu Wei. It's just like go with the flow. It's like, oh, the sage goes with the flow and all these kind of things. He goes with the flow because he's in tune with the changes of the world, because he's trained himself to the point where it can be seen. You know, on a very fundamental level, you know exactly how to talk to people. You can assess the type of person you're talking to by the way they're standing, where they're holding themselves. So you go, oh, this person, in those terms, is a yang metal type person. They see things very black and white. They're very quick on the decisions. Things are good, things are bad. Things, when it's like you're presented with a choice, like we're doing this, chop, done. So yang metal has the image of an axe. So it's like, bam, I cut things in half. Sword, boom, I cut things in half. Make a decision. So you go, oh, I don't want to present this type of person with 18 different choices. I need to just narrow it down to 2 choices, what they can move on. Okay, boom. So there is that idea of naturalness. So then when you have done it long enough, you can embody this and you go, this person is yang metal. Okay, I can just interact with them in a way that's very natural to them, and it just flows, because instead of giving, we have these 18 choices, and they're going, I can't handle 18 choices.
Yeah.
We have these 2 paths we can follow. Which one do you want to do? Okay, boom. And seems easy.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
oh man, so many things came up for me then. I always love this quote, which I got from it, which was, the master who does nothing leaves nothing undone. Like I love these kind of like little things to highlight. I suppose I always like to think of it as kind of paradox, and how to live in paradox, because the world is, in my eyes, inherently paradoxical. And I think one of the reasons I'm drawn somewhat to things like Taoism is you're talking about this taking away of things. Another great example between me and my co-host is I was asking him once, like, when you have a problem, what's your kind of instinctual reaction? Do you try and add something to fix a problem or remove something away? So prime example here is the tendonitis. For me, it's like, I need to take things away. I need to take away some exercises. I've been doing, too much volume. I need to take away the thing that I believe is causing this pain and this problem. Whereas for him, it's much more like, what can I add to fix this problem? And so, his suggestion would be, he's pretty knowledgeable on lots of things body wise. There's some sort of shot you can get, or stem cells, or something like that. And it just highlights that instinctual reaction, I suppose, between the two. And going down that why some people might be attracted to things like this, and for others, like he's never going to be interested in Taoism. That's just not going to be part of his makeup or the way he sees the world, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's definitely It's also this kind of thing. I think like just because some of the stuff I'm reading at the moment is Western theology, mystical practices of Hasikist monks and other stuff. So I'm going down this path at the moment. But we have this very strong spiritual bent in the West, and everyone just immediately kind of goes to the East. They have these things. It's a bit hidden, and then it's mixed in with the nastiness of Christianity and Abrahamic religions, which have a lot of negative sides, but they did at the core have a very spiritual side with practices and with other stuff that you can explore, or even going back to their roots in Egypt. Like, say, you're reading the Book of the Dead. You're like, I'm reading the Book of the Dead. It's like, why aren't you reading the Book of Gates, which is the Egyptian funerary text for passing through the afterlife, which has a lot more imagery in it that you would be able to relate to coming from a Western culture, which has essentially a solar religion. And it's the journey of the sun as it passes into the darkness, goes through the 12 hours of nighttime and comes back and is reborn. Yeah. So the journey of Osiris into the underworld. And you're like, why are you not reading that one? Because the East is more sexy, and people have decided over years, like, the Book of the Dead is more sexy, whereas the imagery in, say, the Book of Gates and the various hours of this is more relatable, because the journey of the sun, you have a foundation in the religious ethics which inform Western society and post-Enlightenment society, which are present in this. So it's more easier to equate it one-to-one rather than like big vulture carrying a person.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that was one of my observations. Was from the book review, I kind of acknowledged, like, I can't take away things from this. There's just so much inherent, not only like language differences, but also these cultural differences of you're likely to grow up in a household with a mum and dad who put emphasis on these certain things versus for me, which is completely different. Funnily enough, I actually haven't heard of the Book of Gates. You said it was?
Yeah. Book of Gates. And like, there is other Egyptian funerary texts. Like, these are the things that they would carve onto the walls and the hieroglyphics inside not the pyramids, but the tombs in the Valley of the Kings to inform the dead. Like, the sarcophagus would be laid in it, so the corpse could read these things to know how to deal with it as it passes through the afterlife. Yeah. But it also would, at other levels, it would inform the priesthood about other things, because obviously someone who was living wrote these things. It wasn't like a dead person dictating them. So they're trying to convey certain values and actions in a symbolic story that you could get through. So it is this kind of thing we have to, it's always interesting, like, kind of speaking out of turn as someone who has gone full stream into Taoism. But the only reason I can actually get a lot out of it is because I have a teacher who had a teacher, like my teacher's teacher, who was basically a refugee from the Maoist purges when they decided to kill basically all the martial artists and other stuff. He fled to France. And then he was able to teach my teacher. His family, the teacher's family, was involved in a diplomatic corps, so they took one of the refugees in, who just happened to be them, and he just taught them from a young age. Whereas if you're just picking up the Tao Te Ching or the I Ching, you don't have the cultural context. You don't know, like, the river to the north, what's that? Oh, it's the Yangtze. But I go, the Northern River. To someone in China, they go, the Yangtze. This kind of thing. Oh, the green bird flies. Why is it a green bird on a blue bird? These kind of things make sense in the culture because they have all these kind of things that inform it. Whereas if we go closer to our own source, like the theology of the Desert Fathers and the theurgy of Iambilicus, we have something that we can actually grasp onto that can be much more practical. Even like the work of the Gnostics and other stuff You're just like, okay, I can actually equate this. I can read what they're trying to say. I can understand these things. We can go, say, straying into Gnosticism. So I'm just dumping a lot on you because I think it would be kind of useful for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Theology of the Gnostics, we have this idea of the demiurge, the creator god. It's like, oh, he descended down from heaven and found himself existing in nothing. So he made the universe, and his picture is a snake and a lion joined together. What are we actually trying to say in that? Oh, we have a snake, which is a creature of the earth. It's very low. It's basically the closest you get. And we have a lion, which is our solar thing. We're basically saying there's a divine spark contained in matter. And this creator God creates reality. And this is what we do. We know this from neuroscience. We don't experience the world exactly as it is. Our body filters it, and it creates our perceptions based on our filters. So we have something that we can actually grasp onto. Whereas if I gave you the kind of the Chinese version of that, you wouldn't understand what the actual images would mean. You wouldn't understand what a quinoline is. Do you know what a quinoline is?
Nah, no idea.
Exactly. See, that's a type of mythological creature. But if I told a Chinese person, they go, oh yeah, Kyrin, oh, it's on the beer. You know, we see these things all around the place.
Yeah.
So then you actually have a symbolic language to actually speak to. And that's what a lot of these texts and other stuff are doing. Is they're using a symbolic language to bypass the rational part of the mind to give a kind of picture thing to the subconscious that it can process these things.
Yeah. This probably also explains why I'm more drawn to things like the Stoics as well. And there is huge overlaps between, if you read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and his kind of calls to himself to, not react in certain ways or acknowledge, this thing doesn't matter in this certain way. There's so much of an overlap between that and Buddhism, and then, parts of Christianity with like the Serenity prayer and things like that. So I suppose a lot of it is about finding that thing that speaks to you. And then the other problem with me is, so I do have this very engineering numbers brain. Yeah. And so symbolism and a lot of art just goes straight over my head.
And that's the thing. It's meant to kind of go straight over your head. And you just digest it on a level of consciousness that you're not knowing you're digesting it on.
Yeah. And that's and I've found that particularly with the Tao Te Ching, like reading that, there was parts from that I couldn't articulate well, but kind of resonated with me a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Which then starts. It's one of those ones where I like start to be careful because it's like also I've seen my brain stray into unhelpful territories of things that aren't true as well.
Yeah.
And it's a trip. Man, living is a bloody tricky business.
Yeah.
That's what I'm coming out with. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I should just quit and find these guy holding the sculpture and the vulture and whatnot.
Yeah. It is. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. You keep going because I was gonna switch topics.
I was just gonna go back to the Tao Te Ching thing. It is, there was one of the people I know who is into these kind of things, and he went to Taiwan to study Chinese philosophy, and his point was like, when I got into it in the West, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to go over here and do. I can't remember if he'd done a full degree there, but he'd done a few years over there. I'm not sure if it was an exchange or whatever. But you're saying, I got into Eastern stuff, so I wanted to go over and learn in Taiwan. And he was like, okay, well, in my library in my university, we had 6 or 7 different translations of the Tao Te Ching. And that was cool. And we had a couple of courses. I go to Taiwan, and they have a whole library that has, translation or not translations, but
just of the
text
Tao
in different things. Just of the Tao Te Ching. They have commentaries. They have commentaries on the commentaries. And if we equate this to say Western stuff, like the university I was in Ireland, they had a whole theological department which had like floors of the library of theology and commentary on the theology to help you understand just the Bible, essentially. Yeah. So we are missing a lot of the thinking behind it, because we think about like how the church has changed its thinking on, say, Jesus, whether he was divine, not divine. Can you become divine by yourself via theosis? Can you not? Do you all these kind of things that people have discussed for thousands of years. Whereas if I was to give you like the Bible and 2 books telling you about the Bible, it's not. Or else they'd have to go to China and do that. They'd be like, this, whereas they're missing this whole strand of development.
Yeah.
Whereas they have the same thing in the Tao Te Ching, where it's like, oh, we have like the Confucian commentaries on it. We have the commentaries on Confucian stuff. We have the Taoist commentaries. We have the Buddhist commentaries on the Tao. Like, there's a lot of thinking that we miss because we're not in the culture and don't have access to it.
Yeah, for sure. And this is why one of my kind of rules of thumb is to default to something along the lines of people can believe whatever the hell they want to believe as long as they're, not harming other people. I'm 100% cool with that because I don't have the time nor inclination to read that much. And so it's like, live and let live, I guess, in many different ways.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you had this intriguing theory, which I really enjoyed, was on bodies adapting to fashion. So you're talking about, and this could have been off the cuff. So if I'm reading too much into this.
No, it's definitely a thing. The tyranny of clothing, I call it in my headspace.
Please, why don't you explain it to us?
So basically, if we look at what's called the cultural body, the cultural body has certain things that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do that are normal for it, but are not normal in a different culture. The tyranny of clothing and how fashion adapts to it. So one of the things that I studied a lot, oddly enough, was, with just the background. So my sister is involved in fashion, she's not anymore, but in fashion, in menswear. I was kind of just interested in what she'd done. So like I was reading about, I'd read when she was in university, I'd read some of the books on like how to make clothes and other stuff. And I got a bit into sewing and other stuff. And I kind of set myself a goal. It's like, I want to make myself a man's suit. I want to make myself like a nice 3-piece suit.
Yep.
I never finished that goal because it's very fucking hard.
I bet.
But I was reading and then just noticed that they were talking about menswear, traditional menswear in the West that's kind of set since Edwardian times. You have your day-to-day suit. You would have evening wear, which would be a tuxedo. You have white wear, which is your formal kind of wear. And these things would have different, the arm size. So the size of your clothes is the armhole, basically. They'd have different height of size. And this in your normal suit, the size is a bit lower because it's not so up in your armpit. But it also means that if you lift your arm up above head height, your whole suit will move with it and it will look unkempt. Whereas in formal whitewear, the vest you have has no back on it. It just goes around the back and goes down the front. And then the arm size is much higher and tighter because you'll be dancing. You want to hold your hands up high. You want your suit to look good, not be wrinkled. Then there's a lot of other stuff on how clothing fits on a person and what that tells you about how their body is holding themselves. Now, in the tailoring point of view, so you want a smooth fit. So it would tell you like, if someone has wrinkles on this side, say what I've got here, means they're standing this way and have a rotation. So you need to cut this much out of the cloth here and add a bit on, and that will straighten it out. But that's very informative for assessing people. We know that from on. But it got me thinking, it's like, so we have these clothing. We have the clothing that allows you to lift your arms up like this, but you can't lift your arms up like that. But then if we start to look at it, if we start to look at what's in fashion, what's presented. So I grew up, in the 90s was when I was kind of a teen, and other stuff like late 90s, early 2000s. What was in? Grunge, heroin chic. Women were skinny, meant to be as thin as possible. Being thin was a thing. No one really went to the gym. Being a bodybuilder was fucking weird. The classic thing, does my butt look too big in this? The question, like the stereotypical question your wife will ask you and say, does my butt look too big? Oh, no, your butt looks tiny. It's flat. Okay, great. That's the way. And the clothing was cut for this. Now, if you're, say, a woman who had a normal size butt or a bigger one, which is in vogue now, then you'd be like, oh, shit, these pants make my butt look too big. My butt is bad, therefore I'm bad. Therefore I need to change my body posture to kind of hide it. Whereas now, say, butts are in, being jacked is in certain circles anyway. So then it's like, oh, cool, I have to have a big ass. Like, having a big butt is cool for men and women. Like, this. So then the clothing is cut for this, but then people who don't have that, but the clothing doesn't look good. So then they're not feeling good about themselves because they can't fit correctly in the clothing that is in vogue. The other thing is, if we think about, say, jeans or other stuff. Jeans were workwear. You were meant to be able to move in them. You were meant to be able to work on the farm. They were kind of like an overall. And then they kind of became fashion. Baggy jeans were like cool. okay, you could skateboard, this kind of fashion, skateboard, rollerblading fashion was all about loose clothing because you still move that. Then you would say, oh, skinny jeans came in. You couldn't really move into them until they put lycra in them. So then, like, standing up, what became popular with the skinny jeans scene when I lived in London? Indie music. How do you dance to indie music? You kind of tap your foot, nod your head, and smoke your cigarette.
Yeah, yep.
You don't go out. Rave fashion, baggy, loose clothes, take a load of MDMA, filthy warehouse. Go for it. You're allowed to move. Whereas if you're wearing your tight skinny jeans in that, you're not going to be able to dance too well. So we can see that the clothing informs the movements permissible by the cultural body. And even today, like you put on your normal kind of fashion clothes. Can you kick someone in the head? Can you do splits? Oh no, people aren't meant to be doing splits. So our clothing don't accommodate these things. Whereas we have to find clothing that allows us to do this. And this is the kind of the tyranny of clothing, because it unconsciously provokes a certain limitation on your moving, just because like, I tried to lift and then, I'm wearing a tighter jacket or something. I can't lift my arm up. It just won't go there because the clothes stop it moving. So this is, the clothing a lot of the time informs the permissible movements, or the permissible movements dictate the limitation of the clothing. It's kind of a loop.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
One of these things that people underestimate. It's like, I just don't feel comfortable in my own body. Maybe it's the clothing. And you can see it now, like we're beginning to swap back around to baggy clothing. There is a cycle on these things, about 20 years of like going from baggy to loose, or baggy to loose, baggy to tight, baggy to tight. And we're beginning to go back to the baggy cycle. So bootcut jeans are back in, flares are back, looser clothing, higher waistbands, these kind of things. Mom jeans made an appearance, and now like lower waistbands or low rise are coming back in. So you'll see, but these ones favor different body types and different phenotypes that look better in them. So you'll see, people who are feeling bad about themselves because they didn't have a massive ass. Oh, well, like low rise jeans are back. And then there's also on this the idea of peak shifting, that when someone says something is good in any discipline, or something is desired, or something defines a discipline, it begins to peak shift to that way. So a movement example off the top of my head, Taekwondo, look at it back, it's a very heavy kicking based martial art. If we look at it from the 80s, the kicking, but you're not going to see jumping 540, spinning roundhouse kicks as the default. It's just kicks. But now, if you look at the Olympics, people are like throwing 720, jumping, spinning kicks, and all this crazy because it's peak shifted. Tai Chi, as an example, was, it was a fighting, wrestling martial art. Like if you look at the history of all the founders of Tai Chi, they were bodyguards, they were owned casinos, they were essentially fucking gangsters, and they literally were killing people with this shit. And now it's like, the slow thing that defined it, the slow, graceful movement, which is part of the body method training to train the coordination in the specific way. That's emphasized because that's what people see as the value and the peak shift. Whereas you'll see this in, butts is an easy one to use. So, Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby's Got Back. If you look at like the classic, but if you look at the video of that, it's a great example of peak shifting. If you look at the size of, so there's the two white girls who have the flat butts, and then there's the girls dancing the rappers. He looks like one of those rap guy girlfriends. Her butt's not that big.
Yeah, right.
It's not like it's, what you consider kind of normal nowadays compared to a lot of things you'd see in the gym, even on men or women. It's not even a gender thing. It's just, like men have huge asses now because squats and deadlifts and everything is in. Like rugby players, blah. But if you look at these people, it's like that was what was considered big then. I was like, this is too big, by certain parts of society. But now the other stuff has gone the other way. So there is a bit of culture in it as well. But it does show that we have a peak shift idea behind clothing. It's like, skinny jeans first came out, or skinnier jeans. They weren't that tight. I had some of them. They were just kind of narrow cut. They got rid of the boot cut on the jean. So you just had a kind of straighter silhouette. But then it peak shifted and started getting tighter and tighter till eventually they were making jeggings, which were leggings made to look like jeans so they could be as tight as possible. And people wanted to be in this kind of indie scene, wanted to be as skinny as possible, so their jeans were as skinny as possible. So that gave the silhouette. So
I'm so glad you're in the trenches looking at all this, because I have no idea. I'm so I'm not sure unfashionable. Yeah, let's just use that that on me. But do you see, and feel free to use the it depends out on this, but is fashion kind of like the base layer, as in like that's culture? Because I could imagine you could make an argument of technology. The technology of clothing fabrication allows these new types, although of course you're able to go back.
Informs it
with certain things.
Definitely informs it, and a lot of stuff like, certain things would feel nicer, or other stuff like, if we go the history of fashion in women's dresses and women's skirts, when they used to wear more skirts, is they'd wear a slip underneath, which would be an easily washed cotton dress that would be kind of loose, and then the dress that might have been made out of tweed or wool or rougher fabric would go on top of that. So then these things became maybe a bit more visible, a bit more other stuff. So then they go like that. Same with things do alter, like things get bigger and smaller depending on how the fabric feels or the technology of the fabric. So shirts, like, it used to be harder to wash things, so you'd have interchangeable collars and cuffs on your shirt. You just button on and off. So then you don't have to wash your shirt itself every day. You just have to wash the collar as it gets dirty. So there is definitely technology into these things and how things can be made. But at the same time, the silhouette and the limitations of the movements that the society says you're allowed to do informs the shaping of the clothing. Like, even say in Australia, where Australia kind of has its own niche fashion because of the weather, where like, a lot
of shorts and shirts. When I was traveling through Latin America, I identified myself as a maybe not Australian, but definitely outsider, and looks wise, 100%. I look different. Although in Argentina, I could sometimes pass for being an Argentinian, but because I'm wearing shorts and shirts everywhere, and the style of it, it's very obvious that I'm a gringo. Yeah.
So there's the culture or the country or the weather also provides some of this as well. But at the same time, like, if you look at, say, boardies, so you're wearing your board shorts, a lot of boardies you can't do splits in, can't do pancakes.
Yep.
Even though they're meant for moving and surfing, where they provide a perfect kind of safe, and like, okay, I can get my legs apart enough on the surfboard to control the board.
Yeah, kind of locks you in almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. There's a quote, politics is downstream from culture, and this could be like one of those things where it's like culture is almost the base layer, and then of course everything goes into culture. So it's one of those just continual feedback loops. Like, you'll never be able to get to the answer of it. But I do like that theory. I think it's I'd never particularly heard or thought of that before. So I'm interested to see how my body will change now that I've started wearing fair use a lot. My feet just start going bendy. Oh, geez. Man, it's been so much fun chatting with you. There's definitely other things I could get into, such as like travel and language and whatnot. But I'm personally like bloody exhausted at the moment, so I think there's a good place to stop. If people were more interested in just anything of you, where should you direct them to, and then I'll maybe add something as well.
So my own website, emmetlouis.com. There's not a lot on it. The flexibility and mobility training is modernmobility.com. Handstand, hand balance, and all that kind of stuff, handstandfactory.com. And then, check out my podcast, The Handstand Cast, and Bendability.
Yeah, and so like in preparation for this, I did a bunch of research on different ones. So I really enjoyed the ones with, I think it was a recent one. You were on the Spirit Box. Is that correct? Yeah, that one's good if for people who are more into the esoteric stuff. They want to learn about that. And then I actually quite enjoyed the Jungle Brothers. Maybe it's just the Aussie connection. You're on there.
I love the Jungle Brothers. They're kind of Joey and the other boys. They're kind of good friends.
Yeah. And what's the other one? The Fellowship of the Range. That's
Fellowship of the Range as well. Yeah, that's the one with Lucas and Jeff.
And so that one's related a lot more to the stretching and coaching sort of angle. So if people are interested in that, I'd definitely recommend checking out them.